UK is in a big crisis. Welcome to Dark Side Tale. The red highlighted island you see here is known as Great Britain, the United Kingdom, or simply the UK. Today, this country spans just 94,000 square miles, but only 100 years ago, it ruled over 1/4 of the world. From North America to Africa, the Middle East to South Asia, East Asia, and even Australia, the British Empire's influence stretched far and wide. At its peak, it was said that the sun never set on the British Empire, a testament to its vastness. But fast forward to 2024, and this once mighty empire finds itself grappling with one of the worst economic crises in its history. As of 2024, the UK's debt has ballooned to 99.5% of its GDP. To put this into perspective, neighboring countries like Ireland have a debt-to-GDP ratio of 43%, and Germany stands at 64%. Gang violence and homelessness in the UK are at their highest levels in 30 years. Over the past decade, homelessness has surged by 50%. London, once a magnet for people across the globe, offering high wages and opportunities, has seen its wages stagnate at 2008 levels, while inflation is now at its highest in 40 years. Thousands of skilled workers are leaving the UK in search of better pay abroad. In what was once the sixth largest economy in the world, 10 million people now live in absolute poverty. In fact, 2 million people in the UK go without food for at least one day each month. If you remove London from the equation, the UK is as poor as Mississippi, the poorest state in the United States. The National Health Service, NHS, once a shining example of what healthcare should look like for the world, is now in such dire straits that 8 million people are on waiting lists, even in critical conditions. And it's not just healthcare, the entire governmental structure is crumbling, from law and order to transportation. The UK is now one of the worst performing developed nations in the world. Just days ago, Britain was literally burning, people were setting cars on fire, throwing stones at houses, and rioting in the streets. The situation has deteriorated so much that even Elon Musk tweeted that a civil war in the UK seems inevitable. So, what happened to the most powerful country in human history? How did the British Empire fall into such a severe crisis? To understand the full story, we need to go back to 2016. It all began when the UK decided to leave the European Union. On June 23, 2016, a special referendum was held where 50% of British citizens voted to exit the EU, a process that came to be known as Brexit. This was the point where the economic crisis began for the UK. But to fully grasp the impact, it's essential to understand how and why the European Union was formed in the first place. After the devastation of World War II, European nations realized that if they continued to fight amongst themselves, they would waste all their resources and wealth on building armies and defending borders. A quick glance at the map of Europe reveals two things: these countries are small and they are interconnected. European leaders understood that as separate nations, they would never stop fighting or achieve lasting prosperity. So, in 1952, 6 countries, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, formed the European Coal and Steel Community to boost their economies. This collaboration paid off massively. For example, after World War II, France needed coal and steel to rebuild its infrastructure, and Germany provided these materials at very low prices. As a result, France was able to rebuild for minimal cost, and Germany gained a reliable buyer for its resources right next door. Belgium, Italy, and Luxembourg benefited from having access to the markets of larger nations like France and Germany. With no taxes and no conflict, these countries traded freely, and their economies flourished. By 1993, 12 countries had joined this community, which had now transformed into the European Union, EU, one of the world's most powerful organizations. The biggest advantage of being in the EU was freedom. Citizens could live, work, and start businesses in any EU country without restrictions. Similarly, goods could be traded freely across borders without any taxes or fees. For instance, a furniture maker in Greece could sell his products in the UK without paying extra taxes or fees. Being a member of the EU also gave countries tremendous negotiating power. Instead of negotiating trade deals alone, each country had the full backing of the European Union, making their bargaining power much stronger. So, with all these benefits, why did the UK leave the EU? There were three main reasons. First, the UK felt it was giving more than it was getting from the EU. Between 2012 and 2016, European countries caught 7.5 million tons of fish from British waters, while the UK only caught 90,000 tons from EU waters. In 2013, the UK contributed £17 billion to the EU budget, but only received £6.3 billion in return. Many Brits believed that other European countries were taking advantage of them. The second reason was immigration. Eastern European countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, which were poorer than Western Europe, had joined the EU, and many of their citizens migrated to the UK. From 2004 to 2021, the UK's foreign-born population skyrocketed from 3 million to 9.5 million. Additionally, during the Arab Spring in 2010, the EU opened its borders to refugees, and many of them sought asylum in the UK. Brits felt that the impact of these EU policies was hitting them the hardest. The third reason was sovereignty. Many British citizens felt that the UK could make better decisions on its own, without being burdened by the EU's policies. This led to the 2016 referendum and the eventual Brexit. But contrary to expectations, Brexit had a devastating effect on the UK's economy. According to the Bank of England, investment in the UK dropped by 25% between 2016 and 2021. The situation worsened with the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. While investment plummeted, the UK continued to heavily fund Ukraine's war efforts against Russia. At the same time, energy sanctions prevented the UK from buying Russian oil and gas. Before Brexit, the EU was the UK's largest trading partner, with 48% of imports coming from the EU, all without customs duties or taxes. But after Brexit, British goods no longer had free access to Europe. To correct this, the UK signed a free trade agreement with the EU in 2020, allowing tax-free trade. But by then, it may have been too late. The UK's economy, being service-based, was particularly vulnerable to financial shocks, unlike manufacturing-based economies like China, which were less affected by crises like the 2008 financial meltdown. The 2008 crisis hit financial and IT industries hard, but essential goods manufacturers like Nestlé and Procter & Gamble remained largely unaffected. One of Brexit's biggest consequences was a massive labor shortage. As of 2024, the UK is short of 30,000 nurses. Without funds to support essential services like healthcare, the situation continues to worsen. And Europe? It couldn't care less. After all, the UK chose to leave the EU. Jobs are scarce, inflation is rising, and anger is building among British citizens. This frustration is often directed at immigrants or people of other nationalities. The UK finds itself in a mess, a crisis driven by poor decisions and selfish thinking. We may be witnessing the final collapse of the once great British Empire before our very eyes.